This is where I come in, welcoming you all. I have to have a 5-second wait because despite the young lady saying that the recording is in progress, she isn't actually right for about 5 or 6 seconds. Well, welcome everybody. This is the sixth follow-up in the series. If I share my screen, I can take you to this slide, which reminds us that we're about to have a look at the September issue of the Bulletin, September 2024, notwithstanding that we're now in October. And here is the picture of the front cover of the September Bulletin on the left. And as usual, I remind you of my email address, should you wish to comment, grumble, praise, or anything else. Now, as I've said, this is the number 6 in the series. If you want to look at any of the others, and Martin's has already alluded to this, you can search for the British Sundial Society YouTube on Google, and that will come up with the appropriate hit. If you want to go there directly, then you go into youtube.com/@the-BSS. Now, at this stage, I would normally go into the table of contents, or an abbreviated version of a table of contents. I'm going to depart from my usual practice by mentioning the fact that next April, British Sundial Society is hosting its annual conference. And this year it's going to be in Winchester, once the capital of England, a long time ago. And we're going to have 2 little breaks from tradition. This is largely by way of an experiment. A number of people mentioned that it is much easier to travel, at least by public transport, on weekdays rather than at weekends, when in particular you can have engineering work on the railways and so on. So as an experiment, instead of being Friday to Sunday, we're going next year to be Tuesday to Thursday. But apart from the shift in days, the format will be very much the same as those who come to conferences will be accustomed to. So Tuesday the 8th of April to Thursday the 10th of April. We are, as usual, at a venue in a hotel. You can see a picture on the left of a corner of a hotel. It's called the Mercure Wessex Winchester Hotel, if you have its full title. And it is absolutely by the cathedral. And you can see a bit of Winchester Cathedral there on the left. I think Winchester Cathedral is noted for having the longest nave of any cathedral in England. And here is a typical bedroom, and you can see the cathedral outside your bedroom window. And indeed, behind the viewpoint of the camera for this photograph, on the other side of the road, there is a sundial. So Winchester has lots of sundials, and I hope many of you will come along to this conference. And if you have an intention to come, please email conference@sundialsoc.org.uk. A fair number of you have, and I'm very grateful for that. We'll send 4 more replies as soon as we know a little bit more about what the appropriate booking procedure is with the hotel. When you send a message there, please give a subject line, something like BSS 2025. And the booking for the hotel itself is not something that we are doing this year. We are going to give you how to book the room. So you have to make 2 lots of bookings, one with the British Sundial Society for a fairly modest fee for the hiring the venue of the room, and so of the room where the conference is going to take place. But the actual bedrooms, people have said they don't necessarily want to stay in the same hotel. And so we're, again, as an experiment, going to suggest that you do stay in the hotel. But if you don't want to, of course, you don't have to. You can make your own arrangements elsewhere. So soon we'll be sending out to anybody who's written to this address in joining details, how to book, and so on. Well, here, as more customary, we go to look at the contents of this bulletin. There are actually rather a lot of contents here, and I've missed a few out, mostly mine. And of these many articles, one is of particular note by Evan Boxer Cook, who I'm delighted to see is with us, and he is going to be giving the postscript at the end. But before we get to the end, we are going to go through, as usual, all the articles, though many of the shorter ones, which are just fillers, won't involve much discussion. So, starting with Dennis Cowan's article, Scotland's Ancient Sundials, and I'm now going to unshare my screen, and Martins will show us the bulletin. There's the front cover again. And he'll turn over the pages, and we'll see the inside front cover, and on the right, the table of contents in full. And we won't spend much time looking at that. So on to the next page. And I should remind everybody who needs reminding that Dennis Cowan was the recipient of this year's Fred Sawyer Darling Prize, and he gave a talk at the Peterborough Conference, and this article is loosely based on that. And this talk was repeated, albeit in a video form, at the Vancouver Conference for North American Sundial Society in June. So I'm very lucky to have heard his talk twice, and indeed read this article. So, Dennis, are you going to give us any background about this article?
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. I presume you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. This is my first Zoom conference, so I was a wee bit wary when I was coming into it. So anyway, it seems to be working. Yeah, I had great fun looking at all these sundials. For me, one of the biggest things was actually the research and finding out where they were now. Thomas Ross gave, indications of where they were, sometimes very good indications, sometimes just said in the village. So it was quite difficult sometimes, but the research was really enjoyable, and I'm glad he didn't give full details. It would have been too easy then. But my favourite one was certainly the first one, Drummond Castle, the one that set me off on this road. That was really good. I went back there a few years ago with my wife. They had just restored the sundial, and some BSS members were involved in that. I went back to have a look at it, and at the end of the day, just as I was getting into the car with my wife, I didn't have my glasses on. Luckily, I had a spare pair in the car anyway, but I had to go around the whole place again trying to retrace my steps and didn't find them. So luckily, I'd made arrangements to take a group round the following day. So I came back the following day and had another look and still didn't find them. And I was talking to the group at the end of our tour and mentioned that I had been looking for my lost sundials when a lady, or two ladies in fact, overheard, and one of them held up this pair of mangled sunglasses, not sunglasses, ordinary glasses, and said, "Is this them?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Funny that." She said, "I'm writing an article on lost and found." And I said, "Well, would you like to take a photo of them for your book?" And she said, "Yes." So luckily I finished up with the glasses again, managed to get them repaired, and but they were a wee bit fragile, so I had to buy a new pair. Anyway, I was lucky enough to get them back. Anyway, that was Drummond Castle. Another highlight was up at Ellon, which is in Aberdeenshire, and they had restored their sundial, and I was up there for the opening ceremony, and the ceremony was performed by Lady Aberdeen, and she came to me and said, "Yes, at my house, Haddo House, I've got an orrery in the garden." I didn't have the heart to tell her it wasn't an orrery, it was an armillary globe. But that was interesting. Anyway, I really enjoyed my journeys around Scotland. It took me to places that I hadn't normally been to. And a lot, as I said in the article, in a few of the places there was "keep off the grass" signs. And notably the security team at Holyrood House were swiftly on my back when I had the nerve to actually disregard the signs and step on the grass. But that wasn't the case at the lost estate of Asknish, where it was had been abandoned and it was in a terrible state, and there was certainly no keep off the grass signs there. Almost needed a knife with me to cut my way through the undergrowth. That's the one there, yeah. I actually was changing the batteries on my camera and dropped the batteries. I couldn't find them again. But that was it, a lot of enjoyable journeys. Another one was the one up there, just on the same page, was at Bemerside, the home of Errol Haig. And I found that after that, I was kind of related to him through his marriage to my fourth cousin, who I didn't know, and she didn't know me. But I can honestly say that Sundial is in the family. So that's about it, really. An enjoyable journey, very enjoyable. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I'm most grateful to you for that splendid introduction. And indeed, this whole issue of this bulletin has a bit, well, not the whole issue, but there is much more in the way of a Scottish Sundial's flavour to it, even than your article, as we should be seeing in the next one. But before we move on, I wonder whether anybody else listening has questions for Dennis, because we really have a chance to ask him questions. And he's written all these articles for us on the Sundials of Scotland, particularly those relating to the Sundials mentioned in the Thomas Ross series. And you can also use the e-book, which Christine reviewed in the previous issue of the bulletin. So there's a lot going on here. Any questions from anybody?
Yes, I've got one. Martin Jenkins. Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
What would be really nice, I think, from the point of view, if you like, of spreading the word about sundials to the public, how about, Frank, this applies to you really, how about publishing those series of articles, the whole lot, as a small booklet?
Already been done.
It's already been done.
It's there. If you read Christine's review in the June issue, I think if that's the right issue, Christine, you're here too. And she's written a review of it and recommends people to look at it. It's not just the whole series put together. That was all done by Fred, but tacked on to the end is the original relevant part of the Thomas Ross volumes. So you can click on one bit and go straight to the Thomas Ross quotation and then come back again. It's an absolutely wonderful book. And I can hardly leave it alone. But when it was first published in June, I was looking at it. I couldn't keep away from it. It's you're quite right. It's a jolly good idea, and the idea is there on the internet for you to look at.
Apologies. Then, but that's only as an ebook version, I take it.
Yeah, but it's really, really good ebook version. It's not just an ordinary ebook. This is an ebook done by Fred Sawyer. So that when you read one of Dennis Cowan's articles in the Thomas Ross series, one of the 40 articles there, they are replete with quotation, little snippets from the Thomas Ross books. If you click in the margin, you're taken straight to the relevant page of the full Thomas Ross, so you can read as many pages as you like and see the full series. And then you click in the margin again, and it takes you back to where you were. Oh, I was going backwards and forwards for days on end when this book first came out. So do try it. It's on the NAS website. And if in doubt, ask Christine. She'll tell you how to get hold of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else got any questions for Dennis? He's not going to go away, so we may well be using him again even for the very next article.
Yeah, can I make a comment, please, to Dennis? Can you hear me?
Yes, Kevin.
I've noticed in a lot of the small kirks in the borders that you could always find well, not very often, seem to find a sundial, typical ecclesiastical sundial, very straightforward, but you'd find it on the southwest corner of the church. And then if you looked on the west side, there you'd find the bell rope to ring the bell. So I thought that was just a lovely example of a sundial being used to call the flock to the church. And I just wondered if you'd seen any other examples of this.
There's quite a few, particularly in the borders, as you said. The sundial normally, in the vast majority of cases, is on the southwest corner, and where there is an external bell rope, that's there right beside it. So as long as the sun was shining, it could bring the flock to the church.
And if you paid close attention to the articles as they were published, or to the ebook, you would see that part 15 of the Thomas Ross series is about sundials in churches, and it draws attention right at the beginning to that very point that you just made. So
thank you.
Dennis has already done that.
It seems to be a thing confined to the borders. I can't say I've seen one anywhere else. It seems to be a fashion for 17th century churches in the borders to have the sundial adjacent to the bell rope.
Any other questions? Well, if not, let's move on to Sue Manston's article about sundials in Dunkeld. Sue Manston may or may not be with us, but she did come to the rehearsal, which we had for this a couple of days ago, and said that she didn't really want to add anything. That said, I note that Dennis has a tiny hand in this article. Maybe, Dennis, you would like to say something about this rather peculiar story, that the house being washed away and then it all being brought back to life again.
Yeah, it's in a position that's easily seen from the town, particularly as you enter the town. And I saw it up there once, and I thought I saw a sundial there. So I went up and had a look. The door was wide open, and I knocked on it, and I could see a kind of young people inside, and nobody answered my knock. So I decided to go in and shout, and they did seem a wee bit surprised. I think there was a party going on, and they think I was wanted to join the party, but I think I was slightly too old for it. Anyway, I asked them, and they didn't seem to know anything about it, so that was it. And I went back a few years, or several years later, and saw that the sundial was in place. The new sundial, or the restored sundial. So again, I went up, and this time somebody did answer the knock, and the owner came out, and we had a splendid 10-15-minute talk about the sundial. And he was really pleased that there's somebody interested in it. But he didn't know too much about it because he was a relatively new owner. So I gave him a few pointers and such like, and he seemed quite happy with that.
Yes, it is certainly very strange what happened. I don't think I know of any other instance of a sundial being on a building which was completely washed away by a violent downpour. But maybe with global warming and all these extra floods, this is going to happen more often.
It was on a very, very steep hill. It was a struggle to walk up the street, I have to say.
Yes. Yes, it's certainly, I looked at it on the map, and well, on Google Street View, and it is indeed very steep hill. There was a retaining wall behind the house, which of course collapsed. And then there was a domino effect, cascading effect, and the house fell down. Altogether a disaster. But sundials somehow survived. Right. Well, let's move on to the next one, which is a John Davis article. And I don't know whether John Davis has joined us. Do you know, Martin?
I do not see him in
No,
our call. No.
He is having problems with his power, and yeah, he has electricity only intermittently, a bit like the problem we had with Sebelod last time. He doesn't have an air raid to blame for the loss of outage. It is an upgrade to the electricity supply to the village, which is causing John problems. Well, this is just saying a little bit more about this mysterious EC and some more candidate names. If anybody would like to make any comments, please do. Otherwise, we move on to the next article, which is about a shipwreck. Now, we do occasionally get articles about sundials that have been found in shipwrecks. And I suppose the most noticeable, most famous shipwreck that we've heard about at sundial conferences is, of course, the Antikythera mechanism, if you can count that as a time device, related, sundial related, let's say. I don't think any of the authors of this article are with us, but I'd be very happy if somebody has some comments to make on these two sundials which were found in this shipwreck, one in slightly better condition than the other. Well, if not, we go on to the next, which is the photographic display, which is at Peterborough, and we can just sort of skim through the pictures. It may be that some of these trigger memory, and in particular, there is on the right-hand page, as you see it at the top left, there is a star sundial. We're going to see another one of those in a later article, or is it the same one? Anglesey Abbey is at the bottom left-hand corner of that previous page. That bottom right-hand corner of the what you see on the screen now. This is quite a well-known sundial at Anglesey Abbey, and the man cradles the old Father Tom, I think it is, holds the sundial in his arms, and it's incredibly difficult for the sun to get at it. So it is the most ridiculous statue, or most ridiculous way of presenting a sundial, so that it is permanently in shadow. But there we are, that's how it is. Now we go on to Irene Breitner's article, and she may well be with us. Are you with us, Irene? Martins, can you see whether she's on the list?
Irene is.
Yes.
Please, Irene, switch on the microphone and camera.
Then we can see you.
Possibly we could try a bit
Okay,
later.
can you hear me now?
Yes,
yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, right. Oh, well, this article is a case of, one thing leading to another, because I thought I was just going to write a small piece, perhaps a filler, about the restoration of this painted dial. And yet one thing led to another. And so it became something much more interesting and complex, which of course happens quite often with sundial research. I first saw the sundial, I think it was New Year's Day in 2010, and have been seeing it ever since, and have been in touch with the owners, who told me that they were having it restored this year. I think I had been involved a couple of years before in being told that they were going to try and restore it and raise funds, and I had made a contribution to the restoration. However, when it was restored and I saw the photograph, the images of the restoration, I noted that, and we need to go to another image, I noted that in the little semicircle at the top of the dial, there was no indication of the latitude which had been on the original dial, which I first saw, where it said 53 degrees 7 seconds. And unfortunately, in this photograph, the 7 seconds isn't visible. However, it was John Davis who started the ball rolling and making this a much longer article. He said that should have been 7 minutes, of course. And he said that Francis Barker would never have made that mistake. There we can see just about the 7, digit 7, even if we can't see that it's minutes. And secondly, John also commented, why should a slate dial have ever been painted? Because slate takes the engravings very well, and it just adds to the problem of maintenance by painting it. So that opened up the subject to looking at other Francis Barker dials of the same period and of the same similar dimensions. And we found 3 other dials very similar to the Fort Bellon dial, one at Sandringham, one which was in a sale at Christie's in 1996, and one which Ben Jones restored. And Ben is with us this afternoon, I think, and he may remember the dial from Devon in 2006, which in fact he had brought to a previous meeting of the Sundial Society in pieces because it had fallen from its hanging. But that dial, curiously, did not have a Francis Barker signature. It was a Negretti and Zambia signature. So the article really expanded way beyond anything that I had imagined I was going to be writing. And it's interesting. Of course, we'll never know whether for sure the Fort Bellon dial was originally supplied as unpainted slate, because as I've explained, we don't have the scrapings to check. Unfortunately, it's too late now. And I haven't been able to find any images of the dial in its earlier days, although that might be something that can be followed up in the future. But it has certainly been an interesting exercise, because it has opened up the question not only of slate dials and being painted, but also the question of Negretti and Zambia putting their signature on a Francis Barker dial. And just a little additional comment, I noted there were lots of comments on Francis Barker dials in this issue of the Bulletin, just as it happens.
Yes, that's certainly true.
I think that's all I can say, Frank.
This issue of a bulletin is dominated A, by Scottish sundials, and B, when we've run out of steam on those, there are plenty of examples of Francis Barker sundials.
Yes.
I have myself overseen the restoration of a Francis Barker sundial. It was a vertical declining slate dial, and it certainly was never painted. It was in a fairly poor condition when it landed on me, or it landed in my responsibility. But I could see, using a hand lens, quite a lot of evidence of gold leaf in the V cuts of the slate, but no evidence of paint. And so the restoration process, we did re-gild it, but nobody ever thought of painting it. Slate's not a very good material from that point of view, partly because it's so impervious. So you need to do a lot of preliminary treatment to get paint to stick. It's as simple as that. Is Ben around? Are you going to make a comment, Ben?
Can I speak?
Yes.
I'd just say that the gnomon was Negretti and Zambia, and that had lovely cursive lettering engraved in it. But the slate dial, the one that broke, was really bad. The lettering was bad, the carving, the spacing, the whole thing was not very good at all. Sorry, that's a very negative contribution, but it's sort of in contrast to the quality of the gnomon and everything else. So that's that. Is that any good?
That's a very good comment, Ben, because it gives me a lead to say a comment of my own. Because for the sundial that I didn't restore it myself, but I used no fewer than 7 different workshops to restore it, and it actually lived in the workshop of one of them, and Eric Marland, whom you know, and he said, we've got a problem with insurance, because my workshop for sundials which are not owned by me, my insurance company needs to know about them. And while this sundial is in my workshop, I need to tell them a value to insure it for. And I had no idea what to insure it for. I simply said to him, how much would you charge to produce, because he'd already taken a rubbing, which we had left somewhere else, if we had to reproduce it ab initio. And he said, well, I could do you this for £3,000, he said. Though, he said, looking at it, for that horrible lettering, I think I'd probably charge extra. And I'm afraid to say that Francis Barker, certainly when we get into the 20th century, was going downhill. And its quality of craftsmanship and lettering and cutting definitely wasn't as it was in its heyday. And maybe the sundial that you restored was a late stage Francis Barker. I can't remember it.
It was definitely not very good.
No. It'd go off. Right, enough.
Hang on a second. I've got a comment just about Negretti and Zambra, which I know a little tiny piece about because I went to school with the grandson of Zambra. They were incredibly good manufacturers of precision instruments, and you can find lots and lots of superb examples, particularly in the surveying world, of Negretti and Zambra work. So they were real high class engineering come scientific instrument people. That's all I wanted to say.
Examples, they were so good that they exhibited at the Great Exhibition in 1851, I think. Yes, the Negretti and Zambra, I'll certainly endorse everything you said there. They were very good. We have a Doug Bateman joke at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Doug, are you going to say anything about this?
Yes, we were visiting Port Sunlight and we were having lunch in the Bridge Inn, and I wandered around a corridor and found this illustration. And in order to get a decent picture and minimize reflections, I was kneeling on the floor and looking up at it. And I'm very pleased with my image processing that I managed to achieve to get rid of all the reflections and have the end result perfectly rectangular. And Mike Shaw added a bit to it as well. But I thought it was quite a novel and a clever advertisement. As
yes.
the products anyway.
Yes. It is great fun. Not too much to say about it, but I'm delighted that you found it and put it in the issue. Next one, I think, Martin's, and this is Valery Dmitriev. Is he with us? He does occasionally attend these things, but he may not be with us this time.
Not this time.
No, he spoke that, as you can see, this is part 2. And in part 1, he noted that he'd been looking at old prints of this great palace and its gardens and had seen 2 sundials in the prints, both of which were missing today. And here in part 2, he explains how he restored or reinstated one of them. And if we can look closely at the gnomon at Fig 2, just below that, that. There you can see Peter the Great's emblem in this equilateral triangle. Martins thinks that St. Petersburg is almost exactly 60 degrees north. So one edge of this, one of the sloping edges of this triangle serves as the gnomon, and the other serves as a, if you like, a gnomon strut, and you've got an equilateral triangle enclosing the emblem of or monogram of Peter the Great. Intriguingly, as shown there, and as indeed shown in the photograph Fig 3, the real thing, it intrigued me how this thing stands up. One assumes, of course, that there are tenons on it going deeply into the marble or whatever the dial plate's made of, because that, to me, it looks unstable. That looks a very, very vulnerable gnomon. I see it's got little railings around it, but not so much, not something that would put off an enterprising vandal in Britain. Maybe vandals in Russia treated more harshly. Don't know. That it's a very fine restoration.
This is closed territory, to my knowledge.
It is closed, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
You actually, right, so it's not open to the public at all.
It's public can access with tickets.
Yes.
So it's like guarded territory.
All right. So it's a safe territory to have. That's the only way of having these sundials. Right. Well, it's a fine piece of work from Valerie there. At the bottom, we have a really nice joke by Jenny Brown. Do we have either of the Browns with us? Is David Brown signed in?
That works fine. Thank you.
I'll just read one of these. For once were two bottles of wine. One said to his mate, "What's the time? My sundial won't show where the shadow should go." The other said, "Neither will mine." And they just put on this photograph of sundial-related bottles of wine. Enough of that, I think. And now we come to Martin Jenkins' article. Martin's certainly with us, has contributed already. I hope you're back sitting comfortably and you can give us your take on your article, Martin.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I can't respond to all of you as individually, but welcome to all of you. What started off this article about the Armistice sundial was at the conference in Peterborough last year. A member was decided he wanted to part company with this dial. I don't know fully the background of it, but he knew very little history of it because the person he purchased it off, my understanding is now dead. So I am not aware of any history behind how he acquired the dial or why he acquired it. However, the interest to me was the fact that it was engraved with commemoration for the 1418 War Armistice. The reason I was interested in that is that one of my father's uncles was one of the few men who survived all three of the major 1418 war battles. His name was Alf Jenkins, and he survived. And so when I saw this dial, I thought, well, that's quite unique. To me, it's got sort of family, if you like, remembrance of that terrible era and the things that he must have gone through. The dial itself is interesting because it took me ages to find out that it was clearly a Francis Barker dial. That subsequently led me to other bits and pieces that I've written about. It's nicely engraved. The mystery to me is that it doesn't ever appear to have been mounted on anything. The studs underneath screwed out, they were just finger tight. Likewise, the screws holding the gnomon on. There was no signs of corrosion under it or anything else. So why it was made or who for, I don't know. As I wrote in the article, I think it may have either been a sales piece because there's clearly, I think, a link between Joseph Sewell and Sons in Liverpool. But of course, it may just have been a gift that somebody had made, because I have since had a member of the BSS and another person contact me to say that they have got old Francis Barker dials, again, that don't show any sign of ever having been mounted. So whether they were unwanted presents of that era, I don't know. Another contact contacted me, an ex-BSS member of many years ago, to say that it was the great period of the terrible Spanish flu epidemic. So it could be that either the original owner or the original commissioner of it died before it was ever mounted of the flu, and the family were never interested in it. Likewise, that could have been the case with the others. So it's a mystery. I treasure it for the connection to the inscription. If anybody ever finds another one with the same inscription, then of course I'll be very pleased to know. It's a lovely dial. The etching, the engraving is still perfect. Because the engraving in those days was not done by hand per se, it was done on early engraving machines, which were quite complex. I'm quite interested in those because they were quite complex pieces of machinery. There'd be the master dial, and then usually it was ladies that sat there tracing the master dial, and the engraving machine was then engraving the final copies that were then supplied. unbelievably, some of these people could do maybe 100 dials in a day. Must have been very hard work. So they're interesting in their own right, although people tend to, I suppose, denigrate a little bit Francis Barker. You know, they weren't the famous the engravers like Elias Allen or whatever. To me, as a manufacturing engineer, they show amazing quality given the era of the time, and they should be treasured without a doubt. They may have been commercial, but they should have been treasured. Coming back to Irene's article about the dial on the fort, one thing I would point members to is the book by Paul Crespel about the history of Francis Barker. It's the most in-depth one I've ever found. And clearly, Negretti and Zambra were again just another customer of Francis Barker. Francis Barker probably churned them out. He certainly made slate dials, according to Paul Crespel. So his book I can recommend. If anybody wants to learn more about Francis Barker and Son, then get Paul's book. You can. It's no longer available as a printed copy direct from Paul. He only ever had a limited edition done, but you can freely download it and print it off if you want to. It's about 400 pages long. I've done it, and you can download it and print it off for yourself, for your own records. Anybody got any questions about the armistice dial?
Yes, Fig 4. Martins, if you can bring up Fig 4 on page 26. Yes, going close to the bottom. That's presumably an engraving in an engraving or something. What particularly struck me there is that the width of the shadow is miles thinner than the width of the gnomon gap. What's going on there?
Well,
is that just a poorly engraved?
No, I think, Frank, that's a very interesting question, because in the little article recently, or in the same bulletin about the extra bit about the Sir Scott dial, some of these people used a great deal of artistic license in their etchings and engravings. One of the things I think could have happened with that one is they used the plate engraving as their, if you like, their common image, and then they would in effect draw in the gnomon, how they thought it should look for advertising or whatever. Because Francis Barker in particular, as you see in the article I wrote, had an enormous variety of gnomons which they could supply, obviously based on people's personal preference. So I think they just used the image of the plate, and then someone drew in whatever gnomon either a customer wanted or Francis Barker wanted at the time to illustrate. I think that would explain why the gnomon width is totally different to the, if you like, the supposed shadow.
But on the dial you've got, the armistice dial itself, that's presumably a decent match.
Yes.
And you're fairly confident it's the original gnomon, of course.
Yes, because the noon gap is precise to the gnomon. I've measured everything on it, and that is one of the gnomons listed in Barker's catalogue.
In his catalogue, yes, I can see it.
Yes, and the noon gap matches perfectly the width of it. It's quite a robust gnomon, really. Again, interestingly, from a vandalism point of view, those gnomons would be very easy to fetch off, because the screws holding them on, which I've measured, are actually 2BA, British Association threads. So, and they're brass. So to pull that gnomon off, even a child, it would be very, very easy. They weren't, I don't think, intended for public display. They were really only intended as private ownership.
Yep. Anybody else got things to say about this? At the end, we have this photograph from the Promenade, Cleveleys, Lancashire, page 30. Next page. Yes, there, picture at the bottom. Not much to say about that. Classic, nice nostalgia photograph from the 1930s. Boy and girl, intriguingly more interested in the sundial than one another. Perhaps that's a good thing. So let's leave that one at that. And then on the next page, we have Evan's article. Now, this is going to be the subject of a postscript, so maybe we don't say too much about it now. I will just give a tiny bit of background that Evan has been to the two most recent North American Sundial Society conferences, last year in Ann Arbor and this year in Vancouver. And he gave a talk about his website, and he's going to say more about it when we've finished. We're nearly at the end anyway, but let's leave that for the moment and move on to page 34. Is Mike Shaw with us? Not. It's bottom left-hand corner. Then on the right, now I know Christine is with us, but even though she wrote this article, it isn't really her article. As it says in the description, this was a collection of photographs was sent to the editorial team, and she thought it was sufficiently intriguing to put these photographs together in the way that you see and just write a few words about it. But assuming Dennis is still with us, do you know this one, Dennis?
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself there. Yes, I do know it. I've seen it a few times. It's in Dumfries House, which of course
Oh, yes.
King Charles now saved for the nation.
Yes, he has, yes. Is he going to restore this sundial?
I doubt it.
Looks slightly sorry for itself, though I can imagine it was in good condition not that long ago.
I kind of favour that this wasn't a precursor of the lectern sundial, but more it was taken from the lectern sundial. Someone looked at the star on top of the lectern and said, "Oh, that would make a good sundial on its own." But it could be either way.
Yes. So I think that concludes our Scottish sundials for this issue. Anybody got any comments? Especially while Dennis is still around. Otherwise, we go on to Doug's article on optical sundials, of which there are many. Doug, are you going to say anything about this?
Yes, I would hope the article is completely self-explanatory. I thought I'd dispose of folders with papers in of people who died some time ago. And then I was surprised to find these lovely pictures inside of dials by Eric Polena and these little I can't think of the word now, and there's the sunspot going through them, and then a nice, rather intriguing box one, which in the sunlight is showing white, but in fact, in the working order, the light shining through, it falls on an analemma. And then, of course, the dials themselves, I thought I have one of them here, and I really doubt whether I can get the light shining. Where am I? Trying to get through it on the screen. Oh, that's really difficult. But the cylindrical lens focuses the sunlight into a cusp, and that led to. And then the other nice one. This was a personal gift from John Churchill, but I've lost touch with the fact, and I don't know if he ever went into production with them, but it's a very nice dial with a gallery and a very clear, straightforward one, whereas the one by Polena has got an analemma on it and a little means of adjusting for your latitude, for your longitude rather, and there is a little prop to go at the right latitude. And it's the sort of dial that you could actually literally take around the world and read the time. So that's I thought that was a bit of fun.
That's very nice, Doug. Thank you very much. Anybody got any comments on these optical sundials? There's a lot to them. When you study each one, you can spend an hour at it before you think you've thoroughly understood every aspect of it. Otherwise, we have another Martin Jenkins article, short one this time. Are you going to say any more about this, Martin?
Yes, actually, it's interesting. What I was saying before about artistic license given to the design in the Francis Barker catalogue, the more since I wrote the short bit about the Sir Walter Scott sundial, if Martins can zoom in on the enlarged view of the dial. Can you move, Martin? No, not that image, the other image connected with it. At the bottom, that one, yeah. Can you zoom in a bit more? No, that'll do. That'll do, probably. People can see that. That's fine. Yeah, no more. That's fine. What I've recently noticed since I wrote that article and was that if you look very carefully at that dial plate on the top and the gnomon, I believe that was added in after the drawing of the column, the pedestal, because on the left side of the circle of the gnomon plate, you'll notice there's a line that goes across, and that matches pretty much precisely the actual square top plate line of the pedestal. So I think, this is obviously an opinion, I think that Barker's, they made the pedestals, and whether they ever actually made a dial to go on back, whether they sold any, I don't know, because it looks as though they just drew that sundial and gnomon in on top of the pedestal, but someone who drew it made a mistake. They should have erased that bit of the line. They shouldn't just have drawn, in effect, the circle image and the gnomon. They dropped a clanger, I think. So I don't think they, at that point that they had that advert, I don't think they actually had a dial for the pedestal. They were probably just testing the water to see if there was a demand for such a thing. And as far as I know, no BSS members ever found one of these things. It could be that they never actually sold one.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Any other comments?
Otherwise, we move on to the next page, and there we have the ebook which I was talking about. This is Christine's review, and so Kevin, here you are. This is the book, and you can download it from sundials.org, i.e. the NAS website. And can we go closer on the front cover? It really does look like that. And then you click on open the page, and you can see the a forward by me, and then there is all the Dennis Cowan articles, followed by the Thomas Ross volume 5, I think, and it's wonderful when you click backwards and forwards. It's very addictive. Let's put it like that. Once you've got it, you will find it hard to put it down. So then we come to the last time's follow-up, about which I need say next to nothing. Will be an equivalent article about this follow-up in due course. And now it's over to Evan. Oh, wait a minute. Just before we do, at the bottom of the left-hand page there, go in close there. At breakfast on the second day of the Vancouver conference, in the breakfast room, there was this table decoration. And it's actually it looks at the first glance as though it's a sort of spiral of going round. It's all completely distorted, but it actually isn't. If you look very, very carefully, there really are 5 separate rings for the Arctic Circle, or the 2 Arctic circles, the 2 tropics and the equator, as well as the ecliptic, with one I suppose is the Earth in the center, and the polar axis and the north and south celestial poles. The only thing missing for this actually to be a sundial are our numbers on the equatorial ring. Why do I mention this? Well, because we're now going to hand over to Evan Boxer Cook, who is going to tell us about his website, and the most frequent keyword that hits his website turns out to be armillary. Right, over to you, Evan.
Yes, thank you, Frank. That is definitely an apt transition. First of all, yes, because of the fact that most people who are searching my website use the term armillary. That's how they find it. But also, more recently, since the publication of my article, I've found that the number of comments on the various armillary sphere videos are actually some of the most in depth. I've gotten a fair number of well-informed, intelligent questions regarding armillary spheres. So I've been very happy to see that level of engagement. Now I will share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see this and we can get into this discussion, what the website has become since the publication of the article. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so just to begin, before we get into the actual details of the site, I thought I'd start with just an interesting piece of trivia, in a sense, regarding the logo that I use. This left icon is the current BC Mnemonics logo, which is in fact the negative space created by the Reet of this leftmost astrolabe, created or attributed to Johann Anton Linden around 1580. I mentioned this just because originally the logo for the website was slightly different. It was actually based on the only other astrolabe attributed to the same maker, and it was this logo on the right-hand side. So minor change, but just following up on a discussion at the last NAS conference, I thought I would include that. But now we can move on to some statistics. So just as a general recap, every video collectively on the website has the collective total of views is a little over 10,000, as you can see here. The only thing is 4% of those total views come from the website itself. So what that indicates is that the vast majority of these people who are viewing the videos, 80%, are watching them through YouTube, which of course is not a problem. The videos are being enjoyed and commented on, as I said. But what this does mean is that people who are consuming these videos may not necessarily know that the website exists, and that it hosts several resources in addition to videos. So over this past year, I have undertaken a bit of an effort to try to bring some of those YouTube viewers over to the website, just to build, maybe bring that 4% up and possibly show people what's available. And the first way I've done that are through these instrument spotlights. So on YouTube, in addition to videos, you're able to post what are known as community posts. These can take the form of simple text posts with images, or you can do polls and quizzes as well. I will get into some of those, but some of my first ones were simple text posts with accompanying images. This specific one was an analysis into the equatorial ring dial, discussing its various limitations, those being slight blockages at the equinoxes and solar noon. But the point of these posts, and there are others, this is just the first one, possibly the most in-depth. The point of these is to grab the attention of people on YouTube, give them something, first of all, give them something genuinely informative, but also include a little line at the end saying, like, if you'd like to learn more about this, head on over to bcmnemonics.com. You can watch the videos, but there are also written explanations, step-by-step instructions, and other content that I'll get into later. So this hopefully would act as sort of a hook to allow people to understand that there is more to be seen on the website. And these posts are not only on YouTube, as you can see here, they're cross-posted. So some of these appear both on my website, on the blog feature, on YouTube, as well as other social media sites, just to cast as wide a net as possible. In addition to these spotlights, I also have a number of polls and quizzes. So just starting with the polls, this topmost graph is an example of one of the polls, the results from me basically asking if you could carry around a portable dial, you took one out of your pocket one day, which would you want that to be? What's your dial of choice? And as you can see here, the majority of respondents went with the equatorial ring dial, which I admit is likely a bit skewed, seeing as though this post followed very closely to two back-to-back posts talking in depth about the equatorial ring dial. But nonetheless, it seems to be the favorite one. And this, of course, it's not simply a ploy to get people onto the website, but this has a secondary, or could be considered the primary purpose of expanding the concept of what a sundial is, tying in, of course, very closely to the concept of sundial evangelism, getting people to expand their prototype of what a dial is, rather than maybe an abstract object in the garden that they don't particularly understand. These sorts of polls are getting people to think of these as maybe more than historical curiosities, something that you could actually use, and prompting you to take that step. And if you were to use it, which one would you want to use? So just getting people to a different level of thought on the subject, which the second example actually ties into as well. This second one is a quiz rather than a poll, and it basically asks people which of the following is not a sundial. And again, this allows people, this expands the concept of what a sundial can be, and it can, as you can see here, you can, and as you very well know, you can make anything into a sundial. I mean, there's the spoon dial, there's a clog, there's an altitude dial on the bottom of this shoe. So really drilling into the idea that anything can function as a sundial. Sundials are more than their horizontal forms, as a lot of people know them as. But also, in addition to that message, just giving people a simple way into the world of mnemonics, giving them a quick way to engage and maybe learn a little something along the way. For example, this post might introduce someone to the concept of a nocturnal and motivate them to look into it further, perhaps following through to the website. Now, in addition to these quizzes, I also have a couple of astrolabe exercises that I've posted recently, again through YouTube community posts. And I separate these just because they achieve largely the same purpose, but they also have some unique attributes. So broadly, what these are simple guided exercises. So say if the sun is setting at this latitude at this date, what star is rising at that moment, and there will be a list of 4 or 5 options, just to name one example of an exercise. But what this does, it gives people a reason, first of all, to use the simulated astrolabes available through my website. For example, this fantastic virtual astrolabe made by Alexander Boxer is available online with a very impressive and useful array of features. And it also gives people a way to put the videos to practice. So say if this is someone who has already seen the astrolabe demonstrations, the videos, they are then able to take that understanding and apply it to their own problems, using this prompt perhaps as a sort of springboard. And the existence of online astrolabes also brings to mind just an interesting, somewhat counterintuitive point that I personally find incredibly interesting, which is the fact that in this modern digital age, astrolabes have sort of become more accessible relative to many other instruments than they have been throughout history. I mean, when you consider an astrolabe versus a sundial, an astrolabe is obviously much more complex, and in most cases, and intuitively perhaps less accessible. but because an astrolabe is essentially a series of rotating disks similar to a volvel, especially if you're only dealing with the movement of the rete, it's very easy to simulate. And so you can create a virtual model that is incredibly accessible, with really no barriers to entry other than the knowledge required to use it. So that's something I hope to, that's a door I hope to open for people interested in learning to use these instruments. Now, beyond the quizzes and polls, another addition to the website since the publication of the article has been a slate of new instruments added to the stock of options. So 4 completely new pages, including the navicula, astronomical ring dial, lunar volvel, and crescent dial. And just as is the case for all of these examples, for every instrument available through the website, these pages include a written description, a step-by-step written guide for one of the uses if there are multiple, in the case of the lunar volvel, as well as a series of videos describing the instrument and giving general overviews of its various functions. Now, as I noted in the article, and as I will touch on a little bit later, these pages also include a set of third-party resources for further investigation, learning on the part of the visitor. Now, also, another piece of recent content are new videos produced for existing instruments. So a lot of these have taken the form of crossover content that allows the video to be added to more than one instrument page. And this not only improves it not only bolsters the slate of content available, but it also links some of these instruments and provides analysis of the way they're fundamentally interconnected. In the sense, in the case of the equatorial ring dial, for example, this topmost video describes its method of self-orientation, and for context brings in the crescent dial, which operates under the exact same principles. So just in that case, linking those two dials shows how they operate under the same principles, and largely how the world of mnemonics operates under standard rules that are applied in often very similar ways between instruments. Just highlighting commonalities there. With this lowermost example, I have it's first and foremost a lunar volvel analysis, but it brings in the astrolabe and shows how interconnected these two instruments are. As if you use the lunar volvel to ascertain the moon's position in the ecliptic, you can then transfer that over to the astrolabe and plot the approximate path of the moon in addition to the sun and stars. Now, as I mentioned, I have also added a number of third-party resources. So these are included on every instrument that is offered. Under every panel, you'll find a group of these resources, and they include, firstly, the virtual offerings for that instrument. So whenever virtual instruments are available, be they simulators or 3D models that you can manipulate in space, I include those here just as an accessible way for visitors to access that instrument. And in many cases, especially with the astrolabe and our Miller sphere, to use them to their fullest extent. Some are more useful than others, I would say, but there are several examples of altitude dials, and particularly the astrolabe, that are fully functional. In addition to these virtual instruments, there are also recommended readings that basically offer the visitor a window into scholarship surrounding these instruments, and hopefully provide an accessible route forward should they wish to learn more. I also include a tab for recommended sellers. As you can imagine, Vsevolod is a frequent appearance here, but there are also some others whenever available, just to point people in the right direction for obtaining quality versions of these instruments on the modern market. Now, nextly, we have activity and downloads. So this is one of the most recent additions in terms of a page to the site, somewhat secondary to the instruments themselves. We have a number of printable instruments, as well as simulators. So as you can see here, I have some printable designs for both the equatorial ring dial and Regiomontana style, and these are instruments that people can simply print, and in the case of the equatorial ring dial, use without really any further effort, other than cutting out the printed instrument. I also wanted to highlight this fantastic simulator of the Prague astronomical clock. Not something I made myself, but I think I feel like I should highlight it and advertise it to some extent on my website. It allows users to calibrate their own version of the astronomical clock, specifically tailored to their latitude, and it can display a very useful range of hours, such as not only the Italian hour, but the true solar hour, civil time, as well as the seasonal hour. So overall, a very useful resource, educational to a high extent, and one that I felt that I should include. Now, one of the last points here, just a general recap of the progress of the channel. So at the time of publication of my article, the channel overall had 7,000 views. That's the cumulative view count for every video put together, which has now reached 10,000. So a significant amount of progress. It has also gone from 190 hours of total watch time to 300 hours. Again, a significant jump that I am happy to see. And from 100 subscribers to 150 subscribers, which has steadily increased. And I believe even now, since I created the slideshow, it's gone up a little bit, not by much, but maybe 153. So again, progress. I also have a bit of an update on the demographics of my viewers of the videos specifically. Very surprisingly, as you can see here, 96% male on YouTube, 4% female viewership. Not quite sure how to explain that, but definitely something to note. As well as we have the age distribution of viewers as well. As you can see here, no one between the ages of 13 to 17, at least no one that has been signed in and declared their age through their Google account. But as you can see here, the trend is it spikes around the 45 to 54 age bracket, which I'm definitely happy to see. I think this is satisfactory. I mean, I'm glad people are watching. Next, I would like to just offer a quick tour of the site, just as if you were an incoming visitor visiting for the first time, just what the site has to offer. So I'll show you that. And at this point, if there's anything specific that people would be interested to see, feel free to let me know. I can take suggestions on where to navigate. If not, I will just start here. But yeah, I'd love to open it up to any questions as well. But just to begin, and I can also answer questions after this. But just to begin, we have the main instrument panel page. So here we have the whole host of resources, every instrument that is available for review. A bit of a preview here with the Analemma Vitruvius. This is not fully fleshed out yet, but it will be the next addition to the site. Okay, planispheric astrolabe. We have, as I said, the written description, the virtual resources. This or third-party resources rather. This particular box, that the Astrolabe specifically, has an additional section which has resources pertaining to making the instrument yourself, which I felt like would be a valuable addition, just because there are so many resources for the Astrolabe. And each of these, of course, is clickable and it will take you to that simulator. As we scroll down, we have step-by-step instructions for just one of the many uses of the Astrolabe, as well as an embedded and up-to-date table of the planetary positions, which does update in real time. As you can see, the offered videos for the Astrolabe. And this is a list that will continue to grow, but as of right now, this is what is available. We also have, similar to the BSS site, we have a discussion of how to convert from local parent time to civil time, just the equation of time and the longitude correction, as well as daylight saving time applied. Just a walkthrough of how to deal with those corrections. More embedded clocks as well. Types of hours, basically just, this is an overview of various hour systems and how to identify them on sundials. Fairly straightforward there. Using sundials today, this section is more of a narrative, and it basically runs through a number of universal dials and provides the pros and cons of using them in today's world. Again, trying to emphasize that sundials are not just objects of history. Specifically, portable dials are viable and extremely educational to use practically. This blog section, while technically called a blog, I would consider it more of a catch-all for both website updates, instrument overviews, as you can see here, as well as videos and demonstrations that don't fit particularly well into any one category. So, a number of resources there. Lastly, before I will end, is the activities page. So, in addition to the resources I have mentioned, we have Lumavulva. I don't think this was on this slide, but printable activity, as I said, the equation of time, ring dial, item kind of style. These are all downloadable directly from the website. And the also, as in addition to the original activity, first item added to this page, the Sundial trivia quiz. So very obscure technical quiz designed to prompt people to conduct further research into the world of harmonics. And I believe that will finish what I have for you. So if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer.
Well, that's absolutely splendid, Evan. I note your figure of 160 subscribers. That's getting on for the total membership of the British Sundial Society, just for comparison. So you're doing very well, and a long may it continue. I like your peak age range. What was it, 45 to 54? Yeah, that's a jolly good peak age range. It's certainly considerably low in the age range of the British Sundial Society conference. In which context, I hope you will come to the Winchester conference, and then people can meet you for real.
I certainly hope so. Yes, I'll have to see.
So, everybody, here is Evan, a new kid on the block, I think one can say, really changing things. This is exactly what we want. As I have stressed at recent conferences, my own enthusiasm for sundial enthusiasm, for sundial evangelism, is unbounded. It's all very well looking at lots of exciting sundials, inventing bits and pieces about sundials, but we've got to find whole lot of new people to take on this interest as the years go by. And I'm thinking 10, 20, 50 years ahead. And Evan is clearly doing this. He's in the modern world, using modern techniques for getting the message across, and definitely to be encouraged. But not for me.
Doug has raised hand, please.
Oh, right. Doug.
Well, very enjoyable and a very comprehensive website, but I notice a lack of horizontal sundials, rather like the Barker sundial that Martin has talked about. And I would have thought if you asked the man in the street, what does a sundial look like, they would draw a sketch of what we would commonly call perhaps a garden sundial. So I'm very curious as to why that aspect had been missed out, as far as I can see, almost completely.
Yes, no, very good question. Part of the reason for that, I would say, is simply because my website mostly focuses on portable dials. And while of course there are portable dials of the horizontal type, such as the Butterfield, that particular is not one that I have content for at the moment. So there is a bit of a hole there. But beyond that, part of the message of the site is to, again, as I said, broaden the concept of what a sundial is. So while there are mentions of horizontal dials, for example, the N-O-matic inclining dial is probably the closest the website comes to discussing the horizontal. I try to emphasize that the principles that underlie the horizontal can be applied in many different ways, that take many different forms that people perhaps aren't thinking about in relation to what a sundial is. Because you're completely right. I think if you ask most people what a sundial is or what it does, I am fairly certain that that prototype that would come to mind would be the horizontal.
Oh. Did I see correctly that Kevin raised hand as well? Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't raise my hand. I was just scratching my head.
Okay. I was thinking that you are suggesting to add something more about equation of time on that website.
Well, I don't know. I think I've done enough on the equation of time myself.
Okay.
Right. Any other comments from anybody? Otherwise, I think this is time for us all to leave. I should point out that where Evan is, it's about 25 past 1, East Coast of the United States, and he has afternoon classes still being at university. I think that's right, is it, Evan?
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll let him go and the rest of you go. So really splendid to see you all, and come again January for when we look through the December issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So thank you all for coming.